Hi guys, I am Uncle Scott and I hope you enjoy hanging out with me today in the kitchen as we talk about this guy. This is a Smithey 12-inch cast iron skillet. If you've ever been interested in a Smithey frying pan, this is the video for you. We've got complete details and information, going to do a ton of real-world cooking, show you the keys to getting delicious food out of this guy with non-stick results. And we're going to try and determine, is it crazy to pay over $200 for a stinking cast iron frying pan? Or at that price, do you get an heirloom item that's going to last for generations? Who knows? Let's jump in and get started. First impressions are very good with this Smithey. Made in Charleston, South Carolina. Comes in a nice box, nice packaging and presentation. And honestly, if you pay over $200 for a piece of cookware, you should expect a nice presentation. Open the box, and the first thing I'm struck with here is the cooking surface of the Smithey. You can see kind of circular marks on there. It's mirrored or polished or brushed, however you want to call it, but a very smooth, slick, almost mirror-like cooking surface, which is kind of unique for a cast iron pan. And the pan also has a bronzish, goldish type color. That is the pre-seasoning. The pan comes with an initial seasoning applied at the factory. I really like that. I tend to think of that as almost a starter seasoning, and it's going to change color and darken in and get better over time. But I like it because you can just give the pan a quick wash and just start cooking. Well, tail of the tape here, it's a big, heavy pan, about 18 inches tip to tail. About 4 inches of that is handle, and the handle has a little bit of a design to it. It's got a little California quail in there and a little bit of a unique shape to it. And in the cooking test, as we'll see here in a few minutes, I found that the handle was fine. It does get very hot. There's some nice engraving on the bottom of the pan. Has a helper handle. The helper handle is not a loop. Is that going to be a problem? It has 3 holes in it and kind of part of the design element of the Smithey. And I guess you could use one of those holes as to hang the pan on a hook or nail if you wanted to. 2 pour spouts, one on each side, roughly 2¼ inches high, 12 inches rim to rim, which is not surprising given that it's a 12-inch frying pan. And interestingly, you get over 10 inches of actual cooking surface. Weighs in at about 7 pounds, 14 ounces, almost 8 pounds. And for point of reference, that is a skosh, about 2 ounces heavier than a 12-inch Lodge cast iron skillet. Looks like this Smithey has some potential. Let's stop looking and do some cooking. Now for my very first cook, I wanted to try some Southern cornbread. I grew up in Alabama, and my mom and my grandmother made cast iron cornbread all the time. Can't tell you how much I ate of it growing up. I even have one of my great-grandfather's old Lodge cast irons here. Probably an 80-year-old pan. If this Smithey is going to compete in the cast iron category, it's got to be able to crank out delicious cornbread. My mom will tell you, and my grandmother would have told you if she were still around, that the keys to cast iron cornbread are 1, screaming hot cast iron pan, and 2, a lot of fat, a lot of grease, a whole lot of Crisco. And wasn't that an AC/DC song back in the day? So I'm going to preheat the oven along with the pan at 450 for a ½ hour. Next, I'm getting my ingredients ready. I've got a lot of fat here, a lot of Crisco, a good 4 or 5 tablespoons. And then you want to use 2 cups of self-rising cornmeal along with 2 eggs and 2 cups of buttermilk. I live in Utah these days and we can't find self-rising cornmeal at our grocery stores. So what you have to do is make your own. Here I'm going with 1 3/4 cups of regular cornmeal along with 6 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 2 tablespoons of baking powder and a half teaspoon of salt, and I give that a good mix. I'm going to get everything incorporated nicely. Bonus points here, I don't do this every time, but sometimes I add a can of drained whole kernel corn. Really bumps up the corn flavor a little bit. That is optional. Now, for the crucial part of making cornbread, we have got a pan that has been preheating for 30 minutes. And what we want to do is remove that pan from the oven. And we want to go ahead and add all of that Crisco. Very important here. Let that Crisco melt and heat up, and sometimes I use a little silicone brush to brush it up the sides of the pan. And then what we're going to do is put that pan back in the oven with the Crisco for another minute or two, just to make sure the Crisco is screaming hot. Might see a wisp of smoke. Then I may bring in my wife here to help out a little bit as I am running the camera, but carefully remove that smithy with the screaming hot oil and pour that hot oil into the batter and stir, stir, stir. There's still a lot of hot Crisco left in that pan. Set the pan down. This is also crucial here. We'll pour the batter into that screaming hot skillet with that hot Crisco, and you should see and hear this sizzling. Very, very important. That is that batter starting to essentially fry just a little bit and set up a nice crunchy non-stick crust. Then into the oven for, mine usually goes 22, 25 minutes or so until it is done. And this is crucial. If you ever wanted to hear a little old Southern lady cuss, and you know that you would, have her turn out her cornbread and have it stick and rip that crust, and you will hear her cuss under her breath. Let's see what happens with ours. Boom, nailed it. And the Smithy did a great job. Look at that crust. Little flip trick. And I like to go with triangles on my cornbread. A little butter. This was my first cook in the Smithy, and I think it did a great job. Worked in a hot oven nicely. The cornbread released. The pan is thick and heavy. It has a lot of thermal mass, and we preheated it correctly. And then that thick, heavy metal transferred that heat and produced a nice crust on the cornbread, and we are off and cooking. Okay, let's see if we can do something kind of fancy. I'm going to make these smothered pork chops. This recipe from the Smithey website. When I review a pan, I often like to make a recipe from the manufacturer's website. A couple of reasons for that. Usually those recipes are created by professional chefs and they're pretty tasty. They're also done in a professional studio with professional lighting and photographers. And I kind of like to see if I can make a dish that looks just as good as the one created in a professional studio with professional cameras. So I'm starting out here with 4 bone-in pork chops. I'm going to salt and pepper these guys. Going to preheat the Smithy on the gas cooktop. Got a little oil in the pan. In go the pork chops. Nice sizzle there. Let's see how we're doing on the browning. Pretty good browning on that first side. Gonna let the second side brown. When both sides are browned nicely, I'm gonna remove these guys to a platter and we're gonna work on our pan sauce. Now we don't wanna lose any of those sticky bits on the bottom of the pan. In goes some butter and a chopped up red onion. And note how that onion and butter is allowing some of those sticky bits to come up and get incorporated already. In goes a little more butter. In goes some chopped garlic and my spice blend. And we're going to let these spices kind of bloom for a few seconds. In goes some stock, and I'm going to start deglazing and getting all those sticky bits off the bottom of the pan. In goes some heavy cream. In goes some fresh thyme. And now we're going to reduce this pan sauce by half. Going to take it 5-10 minutes or so. Now back in go the pork chops and any juice that had kind of rendered out of those pork chops while they were resting. Make sure everything's incorporated. Make sure the pork chops are heated back up. Add a little bit of garnish. In comparing our Smithey smothered pork chops made at home with the ones made in the professional kitchen, I think we did a pretty decent job. They turned out smashingly. And we have another couple of skills to add to our list of Smithey techniques. We have browning and we have making and reducing a pan sauce, and the Smithey is doing a good job so far. Actually, that $200 price tag, quite reasonable if you slip your wife's credit card and put it on there when she's not looking. It's okay, she's on auto pay, she'll never know. Now, all kidding aside, one reason you should trust my reviews is that I buy all the cookware that appear in my reviews with my own money. So these opinions in this video are all mine. Okay, now let's try a little sauteing and a little bit of high heat. First, we're gonna make some Haricot Vert, which my mom often just called green beans. We're gonna saute those up first, and then we're going to sear this guy at high heat and see how this Smithey performs. I'm gonna start out here by chopping up some shallot, as well as a little bit of garlic. I'm heating up the Smithey, and I've got some olive oil and butter in the pan. In goes that shallot. I'm gonna let that soften up for a couple of minutes. Then near the end, I'm going to add the garlic. Just going to give that garlic 30 seconds or so. Don't want to burn the garlic. Then I'm adding some green beans, which I had washed and prepped and par-cooked for about 6 minutes or so. And saute those up. And the Smithey, I think, did a good job getting these green beans ready for my side dish. Now we're going to sear this guy. Pretty good looking ribeye steak. Got some salt and pepper on both sides. I am a late salter. I don't like to salt well beforehand and try and micromanage any type of juices or liquid coming in and out of the steak. I got the Smithey heated up, a little bit higher heat here, a little oil in the pan, and pretty nice sizzle there. I like to give my steaks about 2 minutes per side, and as I flip this steak for the first time, I think we see that the Smithey has a lot of thermal mass and it is maintaining a sear very nicely. The pan did not cool down too much after I added the meat. Then I'm adding some butter. This is going to cool down the pan just a little bit. And I like to add rosemary. I know some people add thyme, some people add garlic, etc., etc. But I am a rosemary guy. And of course it depends on the cut of meat and the thickness, but what I generally do here is take the pan from the stovetop to the oven and finish the steaks cooking there. I like to take my steak out of the oven when the internal temperature gets around 126, 127 Fahrenheit, and then let it rest for another few minutes. And usually it comes up to 132, 133, and that's the way I like my steak. So let's plate this guy up. Got the Haricot Vert, got a little green salad with some tomatoes, and this nice juicy steak. And pretty doggone good, and I think the Smithy did a great job. Now we have a couple more skills to level up our Smithy game. We have sauteed at relatively lower temperature. We have seared at high temperature on a stovetop and gone stovetop to oven. Okay, now I have been told, and I have not actually confirmed this to be true, but people tell me that vegans are indeed people too. That's what they say. And we want to be nice to everyone around here, so after cooking all this meat and these deep fried foods, I think we need to do something for the vegans in the audience. We're gonna cook, Beyond Steak, plant-based seared tips. Tips of what? They don't really say. These are the originals. Low in saturated fat, 6 grams of total fat per serving. And on the back, they say, cook method, we're going skillet. Heat a non-stick skillet. We are not going to use non-stick around here either. We're going to lightly oil the skillet. Then we're going to add the frozen Beyond Steak and cook for 5 minutes, stirring frequently. Season to your liking and enjoy. That seems like more of a command rather than a request. And for those of you who enjoy complaining about background music, you are in luck. Got some new stuff ready to go now. Now, all kidding aside, I've been doing that fasting diet. And yesterday was a fast day, so I didn't get to eat. Today I get to eat, and as crazy as it may sound, I'm actually looking forward to this Beyond Meat because the bar currently is set at these might be a little bit better than starvation. Let's try them. Oh, Lord. All right, here we go. Okay, on the upside, they went in frozen into the hot oil and they're not sticking. They've been in 5 minutes, and the first thing I want to say is they don't smell as bad as a lot of the other Beyond Meat products I have eaten in the past. And they also didn't put out any weird colored gunk in the pan. And third, they do not appear to have stripped off any seasoning. So they didn't stick. The seasoning on the Smithy looks intact. That is good. Let's give one a try. actually fairly interesting, I gotta say. The flavor, not exactly beef, definitely kind of an umami type flavor, but the texture is what is really interesting. If you've ever had a New York strip steak, and you know you get some of the fat towards the top and bottom of the steak, it gets a little bit charred, but it's also a little bit chewy. That is the texture of these tips. It's almost like an entire tray of steak fat. If you want to kind of trick your brain into think you're eating steak, I mean, this does have a mouth feel kind of like eating little pieces of steak fat. But again, this was not for me. Next up, I cook some eggs. I always do the fried egg test around here, in which I try and slide a fried egg in a pan to see if I've got a nonstick cooking surface, and actually, more importantly, if I remember how to cook an egg properly or not. The Smithey here, my first fried egg, stuck. Oh, stuck. Second one, a little bit better. Changed the temperature under the pan. It stuck a little bit, and I got them to kind of move, but they were browning too quickly and really not eggs that I would want to eat. Does that mean there's anything wrong with the pan? Is there anything wrong with the cooking surface? No. What I discovered is that this Smithey has a learning curve, and it's a little bit steeper than perhaps with some other pans. What I've discovered about the Smithey is that the key to getting good cooking results, and especially non-stick foods, is pan temperature. And I know that is true with lots of cookware, but with a big, heavy pan like this, it is double extra important to get the pan heated properly. Now, thick, heavy cast iron like this, it just does not spread heat evenly or quickly. It is not even in the same universe as a copper frying pan or even a stainless steel with an aluminum core in terms of heat distribution. So what I found worked best for me on this gas stove was to heat the pan for 2 minutes, turn the burner off, and let it rest for 2 minutes, and then turn it back on for another minute, and then the pan would be preheated properly, and I could go on with my cooking. And what that 2-minute resting period did was give a little bit of time for the heat to distribute out throughout the pan and equalize, and I got a lot better cooking results once I learned this trick. Then my fried eggs, absolutely non-stick, no spatula needed. And even though this is an 8-pound pan, I nailed the flip. But honestly, no big deal when you're packing loaded weapons like these. And once I got everything dialed in, my egg game was actually pretty nice. I tested this down on the flat top stove in the basement, and I want to check the Smithey on this flat top. One thing that I am interested to see is if this guy, if it heats nicely, because it has this lip, and it probably sticks up somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch. It goes all the way around the pan, and we'll see if that prevents the pan from heating properly on a flat top. Also, I want to point out that the pan so far is not a spinner. And I'm going to start it out heating slowly, and then as the pan warms up, then I'll bring the heat on up a little bit more. Okay, pretty good looking breakfast, and thanks to my wife for cooking the bacon and slicing the fruit and making homemade bread toast. Smithey produced some nice scrambled eggs, and importantly, did not warp or deform. It worked well on the flat top. This is what it looks like after cooking eggs, and normally if things go correctly when I cook eggs and nothing sticks, I just wipe the pan out with a paper towel. Now I also have the Smithey Farmhouse carbon steel skillet, and I want to compare and contrast these two pans just a little bit as we go here. With the preheating, it was 5 minutes before my eggs ever hit the pan in the cast iron. With the Smithey Farmhouse carbon steel skillet, my eggs are on the plate in about 3 minutes. Another thing I find interesting is that they are kind of sort of opposite from cast iron and carbon steel you might be used to. For example, a Lodge and many other cast iron brands have almost a bumpier textured surface a lot of times. In carbon steel, something like a French-made Debouille Mineral B Pro, I'm used to it having a very slick surface. It's almost the opposite on these Smithies. The carbon steel has a texture to the surface, you can see it on there. And the cast iron has a slick, almost carbon steel-like surface. And with that slick surface, I found that once you do get the pan preheated evenly and correctly, everything was very non-stick. For example, hash browns. Normally, if you cook your hash browns at the wrong temperature, you're gonna need a hammer and chisel to get them out of a pan. Got the Smithey heated correctly, got my hash browns in, and they are sliding around. Non-stick hash browns. Some skillet potatoes, got the oil heating up. Put in a few potatoes, and this test potato just started sliding right across the pan. Very non-stick, and I may need to check the level on my stovetop. And for things like fried okra, a little more southern cooking here, also non-stick. And I can't reiterate enough how important getting the pan temperature correct is for a thick, heavy pan like this Smithey. Okay, we're going to continue with the southern fried theme here and fry a little chicken. Got these guys ready to go. These are hand-dipped, hand-breaded chicken tenders. I've got 3.5 cups of peanut oil, and I'm going to go ahead and get that heating up. And I'm going to use the old flat top here, as opposed to being on that gas stove with the open flame upstairs. I don't think we would run into any trouble, but I just want to be double careful. Now I've got some, just in case anything gets out of hand, and it's not, I've got a lid, I've got some heat safe gloves, and I've got a fire extinguisher. Probably not going to need any of that, but it never hurts to be prepared. So while the oil is heating up here, let me just run through the recipe that I'm using. This is mostly the fried chicken recipe from the Smithey website, although I did make a few changes. For whatever reason, my local grocery store out of bone-in skin-on chicken thighs and also bone-in skin-on chicken breasts. Who knew? So what I did instead was get 4 boneless, skinless chicken breasts, and I'm going to get a buttermilk marinade going here. I have got 4 cups of buttermilk, so that would be a quart if I remember correctly. Salt, I got 2 tablespoons of hot sauce. I'm using Tabasco, and I'm also adding a little bit of fresh rosemary and a few smashed garlic cloves. Now for once I did go with the non-GMO, no added hormones or antibiotics, relatively healthy chicken here. And for these breasts, they're not quite as big as the GMO mutant breasts, but I got 4 or 5 good-sized chicken tenders out of each, and I submerged those in the marinade, the buttermilk marinade, and I refrigerated those, and those were in the fridge for 5 or 6 hours. When I got ready to cook, I made a flour dredge, and here is where I stuck really close to the recipe from the Smithey website. Got 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 4 tablespoons of cornstarch, ½ teaspoon of salt, and a good teaspoon of fresh ground black pepper. Mixed all that up, and then I take my marinated chicken tenders, kind of shake some of the excess buttermilk off, roll those in the flour, and now I have got them all laid out on a wire rack. And these guys are ready to go. And when you're working with raw chicken like this, I like to kind of set up a little bit of an assembly line. So I got my raw chicken over here. I've got one set of tongs that will just be for the raw chicken. Then they're going to go into the hot oil where they will cook. They will temp them with the thermometer, and when done, they will go on a separate clean wire rack using a fresh, clean pair of tongs. 355 degrees. Now I am using peanut oil, and I want the oil temperature here to be between 360 and 375, so we're pretty much ready to go. This peanut oil should have a smoking point somewhere up around 450 or higher, and that should give us plenty of wiggle room and keep us out of trouble and keep us safely away from that oil smoke point if we keep everything down in that 360 to 375 range. To an old southern boy like me, that is a very nice sound. The oil temperature dropped down to about 320, and I'm going to monitor the rebound, but if it cooks somewhere in this 320 to 350 range, just keep an eye on everything, and I think it'll be okay. Okay, let's see if we can turn these and see how they're doing. Okay, so those guys are up to temp internally. I'm gonna let this first batch get just a little bit more color on the exterior. Looking pretty good. I got the second batch in. I think we are morally obligated to try a piece. Now, besides safety, not cooking over an open flame, one other thing I like about frying the chicken on this flat top stove is that there's a lot of splatter. That flat top makes it a lot easier to clean everything up. It's not down in burners and underneath grates. Oh my! That is a pretty good looking tray of fried chicken. And I think the Smithy did a great job. That thick cast iron, very heavy. We get the oil temperature up to 360 to 370, put the chicken in. The oil temp would drop immediately down to around 300 or so. But then with that thermal mass of the Smithy, it rebounded very quickly up to 330, 340 or so. And then at that point, I would dial back on the thermostat a little bit. I don't want it to get too hot while the chicken is frying. These chicken tenders, the way I cut them, the thickness I cut them, they went about 5 minutes. So about 2.5 minutes first side, 2.5 the second side. And then I temped each one individually. Just when I work with raw chicken, I want to make double sure everything is cooked properly, and they are delicious. So very happy with the Smithy when it comes to Southern style frying chicken. You know, I was just thinking last night, was I just a little bit too harsh and made too many jokes about vegans and vegetarians when I cooked those Beyond Steak brown tips? In all honesty, they did hurt my stomach. I had to take an Alka-Seltzer. But I did make all those chicken tenders last night, and I started feeling bad about it and was thinking, well, maybe today I should do something to kind of make up to the vegans and vegetarians and cook something that is not chicken tenders. So I came up with these. These are not chicken tenders. Package, nothing at all phallic about the advertising and image there on the package. Full flavor, 0 clucks. And this is not in any way an oxymoron, but they claim to be plant-based breaded chicken tenders. What? Let's give these guys a try. Now, on the back of the package, they only have directions for oven and air fryer. However, if you can air fry something, you can pan fry something. This time I'm ready. I've got my Alka-Seltzer ready to go. Not a sponsor, although if you'd like to be, please do get in touch. Kind of crazy, my chicken tenders had maybe 4 or 5 ingredients. The supposedly more healthy, all natural ones got probably 30, 35 ingredients. Who knows what is in these things? They seem fairly light for the volume there. Let's see if they fry. Whoops, forgot to turn the old iPhone on here. Okay, we'll see how we do. One thing I have come to realize with this Smithey, the handle gets very hot. So if you're going to use the Smithey cast iron, definitely want to have a mitt around. Okay, here they are. Now, I'm not sure exactly what these things are. We do know that they are not chicken tenders. And they browned up nicely. And they did not stick. That is a good thing. And let's give one a try. Okay, got some crunch on the outside, nice browning on there. And first bite reaction here, they don't taste exactly like chicken tenders, but they are within the realm of tasting and seeming like actual chicken tenders. Believe it or not, the flavor, or maybe it's the crunch on the outside, reminds me a little bit, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, of my mom's salmon croquettes back in the day. Okay, so I'm going to say for a pretend meat product, these not chicken tenders, although they are not chicken tenders, actually not half bad. And if I were to choose between the Beyond Steak and the not chicken tenders, I would go with the not chicken tenders by a mile. I might actually buy these again someday. Now let's take a closer look at this seasoning. Unsurprisingly, the Smithey, it starts out shiny and darkens in the more you cook. I've found that the cooking surface seems to act a little more like smooth carbon steel rather than more textured traditional cast iron. And the trade-off there is that I get a slicker cooking surface that is more non-stick than rougher traditional cast iron. However, it doesn't seem to hold a seasoning quite as long either, and I need to re-season the pan a little more often. No big deal though. Now some foods will remove a little seasoning. For example, cooking this bacon. With bacon, I lay out my bacon in a cold pan, no preheating, and I give it some early flips as the pan comes up to heat, and the bacon is non-stick. All good there. But for some reason, that bacon seemed to remove some seasoning. Likewise, my little 6-year-old son loves manwiches, so I browned some beef, added some slightly acidic manwich sauce, and after deglazing and cleaning the pan, I could tell that it needed to be re-seasoned. Side note here, probably not the greatest idea in the world to cook heavily acidic foods in either cast iron or carbon steel for that matter, as the acid can eat away at seasoning. So let's show how to re-season a Smithey cast iron pan. The instructions from the Smithey website are darn near identical to what we do for carbon steel. Simply heat the clean, dry pan on a stovetop burner, add a half tablespoon or so of oil. I like to use peanut oil. Wipe that oil around the pan with paper towels, then wipe with more paper towels until the pan looks dry. Wait for that pan to start smoking on the burner, and you'll see a little color develop. And you can repeat that if you want to add a little bit more color, and that's it. Pretty fast and easy. So my smithy started like this. It's been cooked in and re-seasoned a bunch and is currently looking like this. And I fully expect it to continue to darken in and get better and better over time. I'm going to continue with the Southern cooking theme and cook some fried squash in the smithy on this induction burner. And what I did is start with 2 yellow squash. I got those washed and then sliced those up into roughly 3/8 inch pieces. And then I took a flour mixture. The flour mixture is kind of the base, so about 2 cups of flour, teaspoon of salt, some black pepper, and then I kind of got the shakes. And I shook in a little bit of white pepper, a little bit of cayenne, a shake of garlic powder, a shake of onion powder, a little herb de Provence. You can kind of shake in any other thing that you want. And what I'm going to do is set up a little assembly line. I'm going to dunk those squash slices in the milk and then into the flour mixture and place those on a wire rack and let those rest for 10 minutes or so. Then I'm going to essentially repeat the process with the breadcrumbs. Again, the squash slices go into the milk, then into the breadcrumbs, then back to the wire rack. Which brings us to here. Got these guys ready to go. And a couple things I like about frying squash like this. A, it's delicious, and B, when I'm reviewing a frying pan, I can kind of place these around the bottom of a pan and judge how they brown. If they brown at the same rate, then I know the pan is cooking evenly. So let's get the smithy heating up or not over here. These induction burners have to have a pan on them to even turn on. The rim, still room temperature. Cooking surface starting to get hot. And that tells me that that rim around the bottom of the pan may not be a big deal for induction. I was really worried about that, but it's heating up so far. And again here, I am going to fry in some extra virgin olive oil. This is not going to be particularly high heat. I don't think we're going to get anywhere near the olive oil smoking point for these kind of lower, more moderate fryings. I think extra virgin olive oil works pretty well. Okay, so for the first batch of squash, I've got a couple of test pieces in the pan, and one thing I noticed right away is that the one in the middle is sizzling and the one out towards the edge is not. So there's definitely a hot spot in the middle of the pan. To turn the squash, I noticed that the ones in the middle were definitely cooking much more quickly than the ones towards the edge. Now for the second batch, at least they didn't stick. I'll give it credit for that. What I decided to do here is move the squash so that sometimes they were over the hotter area in the middle. And as they browned, I exchanged them and moved them around for ones out towards the edge. Okay, I'm going to give this cooking experience with the smithy and the fried squash on the induction burner a solid B-. There are some upsides and there's some downsides. On the upside, the squash turned out nicely. Also, they didn't stick, and I was able to get that pan to at least heat up on an induction burner. On the downside, and we've remarked this before with induction burners, you really got to match up the size of your cookware with the size of your burner. Not with the size of the graphic, but with the size of the actual coil or burner or whatever it is underneath. Often the graphics are bigger, but the heating element underneath is a lot smaller. And I saw that here with this pan. I got a hotter spot in the middle and much cooler out towards the edges. And with a lot of finagling, I got some decent results, but just all that moving around and the amount of time it took and pieces of squash going from hot in the middle to relatively cooler on the sides. It took too long, and I think a few of them got a little bit soggy. And in addition to issues with coil size and pan size, there's also an issue here with cast iron itself. It just does not transfer heat very rapidly or efficiently. It's nowhere near something like a copper, which would not work on an induction, but an aluminum core stainless steel would, and those would transfer that heat from the middle out towards the edges of the pan a lot more efficiently than cast iron does. And perhaps most importantly, the pan did not turn into a spinner, so it did not warp or deform. Okay, so over the last few months, I have been cooking in this smithy, and it has turned out some absolutely delicious food. That is the most important factor. Doesn't hold the seasoning quite as well as some other cast irons that I've owned, but once you get over that learning curve and figure out how to get the pan heated evenly and correctly, you get tremendous non-stick cooking results. Now, at the top of the video we asked, is it crazy to pay over $200 for a cast iron frying pan? That depends. If you are looking specifically and only for performance for the money, there are much better values out there in the cast iron world than the smithy. However, if you like artisan products, small batch products, if you like nice things in your fancy kitchen, especially in the age of hyperinflation, where $200, $210, I can barely take my wife out to dinner a time or two for that. If you look at this pan maybe lasting 80 years, like this lodge from my great-grandfather, then it's only a couple of bucks a year. And that does kind of seem like a bargain. I think I've gotten every penny's worth of enjoyment out of my $210 I spent for this pan. I like it, and I give the smithy a thumbs up. Now, if you've enjoyed this video and found it helpful and used it to make a purchasing decision, a nice thing to do if you're going to get one of these smithies is use that affiliate shopping link below. Helps offset some of the cost of buying all the gear around here. Make sure you leave your questions and comments in the feedback area below the video. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time on Uncle Scott's Kitchen.